Hello everyone, once again I'm back and we're going to attack our first special video lecture on unemployment. Once you've finished this video, obviously you can go check out the textbook and you can attack some of the problems that I've listed below this video on Blackboard, and those problems will be discussed during our live session that should be soon in this week or early next week, but hopefully later in this week. So let's get started. We'll discuss now unemployment, how it's measured, where it comes from, and what it means for an economy. So first off, I think it's important for everybody to know that unemployment measures the number of persons that are unemployed, which as you see here, of the labor force itself. Now, the labor force is not the same thing as all persons age 15 and over. All persons age 15 and over is our pool that we'll be pulling from, and it's very important to start with that. We're not going to be looking at young people that could never be unemployed, obviously. So we first start with our pool of people, so the working age population. And the working age population looks at all people age 15 years and above, and those who live in private households. Now that's an important element, because by doing that, we're going to exclude naturally people living in residency halls at universities, people in hospitals, old people's homes, prisons, and military personnel. So these are people that are excluded from that huge working age population. And in Europe today, if you take a look at the statistics, we're looking at about 327 million people in Europe today. Now, how do we go from working age population to labor force? Well, the labor force is defined by people either in work or actively seeking work, obviously. So they're working or they're looking for a job. It can include students age 15 years or over, as long as they're seeking work or are available to work or are working at least 1 hour per week. So it's not a standard student. We're not talking about full-time students here, and they must be at least 15 years or over. We also include, obviously, persons with a foreign citizenship. So people like me. I'm a foreign citizen. I have a U.S. nationality, but I live and reside in France. So they are considered residents of the country, and thus I am included, for example, in the labor force survey of the country of France. So the labor force includes all of these people, those that are either working or seeking work. Today, the labor force in Europe is about 241 million people. And the participation rate, or the activity rate, for the population is about 74%. So 241 divided by 327 gives us 74%. So as you can see, 26% of the working age population is in fact not in the labor force. They're not actively seeking work. They're not over 15 years old, or they're not actively working. Now, this is going to be a bias later on, we'll see, because we've excluded from the labor force people who are not actively seeking work or who have given up looking for work. We're not going to include them as we progress in our definition of what is unemployment. A unique and interesting point, and this is why many people will say that unemployment statistics do not really measure the extent of unemployment in an economy. But that's another question. So let's go on and let's see how we move forward to define employed people and unemployed people, which are in the labor force. So employed people are those persons that perform some work, even if just for 1 hour. And again, this is part of a definition of employment that a lot of people may not agree with. So we're looking at people that are not working full time. They're looking at working maybe even just 1 hour, a small amount of work during what we call a reference week. This is when this survey is conducted. And obviously they're working for 1 hour for pay, profit, or family gain. There's some economic gain from their work to be considered employed. Alternatively, people that were not at work, but that have a job from which they are temporarily absent because they're sick. So for example, if I fall sick, I'm not at work, I'm not performing any work for that week, that reference week, but I do have a job. So I would be considered as employed. I'm not at work because of an illness or for a holiday or for some other reason. The unemployed, well, that's just about everybody else. And let's make a quick look at what it could mean. Number one, they're not in employment during the reference week of the labor force survey. So during that specific week that we measure employment or unemployment, they are not employed. Secondly, these are people that are available to start work within the next 2 weeks, meaning they're people that may have found a job, that are ready to start a job in the next 3 months, but they're not currently in the job for the moment. They're available to start work within the next 2 weeks following the reference week, but they're currently not working. Thirdly, and this is extremely important, the unemployed must be actively seeking employment. If you are not actively seeking employment at some time, you're not part of the labor force. You're not looking for a job. So remember, employed and unemployed, either you're working or you're looking for a work or will soon be taking on a job. So unemployed are actively seeking employment at some time in the 4-week period ending with the reference week. So that means the last 4 weeks. How do we measure actively seeking employment? Well, we can start with having been in contact with the public employment service. So in France and in many European countries, we have unemployment agencies, and people are required to go and look for a job and to make a meeting and have a meeting with these unemployment agencies to be considered actively seeking employment. Now, a lot of times we want to do that. People will do this because to get their unemployment benefits or unemployment insurance, they must also prove they're actively seeking employment. You can also apply to employers directly and prove to the unemployment agencies that you're looking for a job. You can be looking around and all the stuff that you see here listed. Basically, you need to prove this. And as I've said before, the unemployed really will benefit from unemployment insurance if they actively are seeking employment. So let's get back to our definition. We've gone from 327 million people age 15 and over. We've defined our labor force as 241 million, about 74% of the working age population in Europe today. And if we go one step further, we find that we've got about 224 million people that are employed. So we have, on average, in Europe today, about 7% unemployment. And that's our unemployment rate. It's the percent of the labor force, not the percent of the working age population, the percent of the labor force that is not actually working in the reference week. Now, as I've said before, some of these issues of unemployment lead us to believe that a lot of unemployment is not really represented in the unemployment rate. And we call this hidden unemployment. And there are three types of hidden unemployment. You've probably picked them out as we've gone along in the definition of what is unemployment. The first would be part-time or temporary workers looking for full-time or permanent work. These people are considered employed. I mean, if you take a part-time job and you really want a full-time job, but you take a part-time job because you need some cash or money to get along, well, for the statistics, you're considered employed. Whether you're full-time or part-time, you are employed. So we may have a low unemployment rate, but a lot of those people may only be working part-time, and maybe they want a full-time job. No matter what, they're considered employed and not unemployed. The second would be those persons that are underemployed. And this is typical in economies where people maybe can't find a job that matches their skill set, the types of jobs they really have been trained to do or want to do. And because they have expenses, because they have to pay rent, these individuals will accept a job that is, let's say, lower than what they wanted. So a person that was trained, let's say, to be an engineer, may for some reason take a job working at McDonald's, making hamburgers because he or she has bills to pay. This person is underemployed. This is not the type of job this person wants. But if we look at the macroeconomic statistic, hey, they're working and everybody's happy, but the person's not happy. And so unemployment numbers really don't tell us about the underemployed. Now, you can find statistics about the underemployed, but you don't see it in the unemployment rate. And the last is what I referred to in the beginning, the discouraged workers. The discouraged workers are those persons that are not in our labor force. They have basically pulled themselves out of the labor market and the labor force because they've given up. They've tried to find a job. They've tried to see what they can do. They even maybe tried to find jobs below what they really want. And after some period of time, after maybe a long period of time, they give up. And they're discouraged and they basically stop looking for a job. They are neither employed nor unemployed. They are not in the labor force. They're not in the denominator of the ratio that defines unemployment. And this, again, is a problem with the measure, the statistic of unemployment. It's interesting to look also at how we define those persons that are employed. If we look at employment, about 85%, the vast majority of people that are working today are working for a public or private employer, a company, for example, and they receive, obviously, pay for their work. Some people are self-employed, and they're doing this in their own company. They may be receiving a salary or not because they're, let's say, owners of the company. They may rely then on profits that their company make to reward themselves and may not have a salary per se. That depends on the type of company that you create and how you define your company. 14% of people are self-employed, and they obviously can employ other people. In France, we have very specific definitions for companies that have only one person employed. Self-employment is an option in many countries, and trust me, if you are self-employed, you will continue to pay income tax, and in some cases even more income tax than if you were just employed by an organization. About 14% of people are self-employed today. And lastly, family workers, working in a family business, basically. I mean, they're working in a family-run restaurant or a family-run farm. This represents a very small percent. 1% of workers today, of employed workers, are in family-run businesses, they're not considered as employees. If you are an employee in a family business, you would be in the 85%. You often find family workers at young ages in family-run restaurants and various activities like that. Now, in Europe, if you want to know a little bit more about statistics in unemployment, you can find them on Eurostat. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you where you can find this data. It's a very interesting website. Hopefully you've already been to Eurostat. So this is the website here. And so if we flip over to Eurostat, let's see if I can find it on my screen here. Here's the screen for Eurostat. And we have a lot of data that's available to us, young economists, and we can go right into. Okay, so here we have the Eurostat website, and we can see a large supply of data that's provided to us within Eurostat. And as I mentioned on the slides, let's go back to my slides if I can find them. Here we go. If we look under data and database, we'll start looking for the unemployment rate, and we'd like to find maybe the unemployment rate in 2018 in Europe between 25 and 64. If education is level 0 to 2, a very low level of education. So where would we find this data about the unemployment in 2018 in Europe for that age group? Well, let's take a look. We can browse the data here. We've got city statistics, GDP, and our economy. We have a lot of population and social indices here as well. And if we look, we've got here labor market. So let's dive into it here. And yes, this is where we find the labor force survey statistics for Europe. And LFS, labor force survey, here we are. Let's take a look. We've got our main indicators right here, and we've got the unemployment numbers for our various countries. And we can see here right away, I've got unemployment by sex and age. I have unemployment annually, monthly, quarterly. I also have unemployment by education attainment, which is down here. And so if I want to find unemployment by level of education, I'll be looking in this data set here. So what we want to do if we want to find, for example, unemployment in Spain by gender in 2019 for 25 to 74-year-olds? Well, obviously I can come into this data right here, and I'd want to start navigating the data set that's provided to me. So we said we were looking for persons of a certain age. Well, we can go here and we can select our age group that we're interested in. If I'm not mistaken, we said we were looking at 25 to 74-year-old people. And so we're going to select the subsample of persons that are in that age group. So here we are, 25 to 74 years old. We'll remove the other group and we'll continue. And so we've updated the data. Now the next thing we can do is we can then look at our geography. Now, I was interested in looking at Spain. We can see that Spain is mentioned and will be mentioned here. So I really don't need to select just Spain. I can, if I like. So I can come into here and just select the data for the country of Spain if I so wish to do so. This isn't required. I can just take the numbers for all countries. But here, let's take Spain. So it should be ES, Spain. Here we are. And update. And my table will decrease as I'm only looking at one country for unemployment rates. This is unemployment percentage of the active population as we want. So what have I got? I've got 2018, 2019. I've got the unemployment rate for Spain. And now what do I need? I just need by gender. So let's take a look. I can come here and find the various gender specifications. So I can look at total male and female population. I can update that. And off we go. And I should be able to find the annual unemployment rate in Spain for 25 to 74-year-olds. And hopefully we'll see this pop up in just a second. And this is how you navigate the unemployment statistics provided by the European Union. I don't see the numbers here for everybody, but if I were to just look for males, obviously I would have the male population, and it's updating, or I could have just the female population if I want. So what I'd like you to do is to take a minute, go to Eurostat, see if you can find out the unemployment rate in 2018 in Europe, 25 to 64-year-olds, if education level is 0 to 2. And do this for the entire 27 EU countries. So see if you can find that unemployment rate. Also, take a look for unemployment in Spain by gender from 25 to 74-year-olds for December of 2019. So that would be the reference year. And I think that you can find the monthly data as well. So take a look at the monthly, not the annual data like I was showing you, but the monthly data and focus on December 2019. What I'd like you to do now is to pause the video, see if you can find this information, and we'll continue afterwards. So hopefully you've paused the video and you discovered the unemployment rates, and hopefully you find the same numbers that I did. The EU 27 unemployment rate in 2018, if the education level is 0 to 2, meaning basically a high school degree, not even, is about 14.9%. And in Spain, by gender, we're looking at an unemployment rate of 15.9% for women and 12.2% for men in the month of December. Now, over time, what do we see? We see that unemployment fluctuates with the business cycle. Unemployment will rise during downturn of economic activity, and unemployment will go down, obviously, when the economy is expanding. And we see in this cycle of unemployment that it follows a business cycle. You'll also note that it never ever goes to zero. 0% unemployment is really never heard of, and we'll see why in a few minutes. But unemployment rates in some countries are very low. As I said, in a lot of European countries, we're looking at 7-8% unemployment. The United States, I think it's currently around 4% or 3%. Unemployment numbers lag slightly behind economic growth cycles because it takes time for the economy and employment to respond to expansionary and recessionary cycles. If we look at the numbers for France from Eurostat, we see that unemployment by gender, which is an issue we discussed last time in class, was some of the reasons why unemployment numbers are higher and why wages are lower for women. We've seen that unemployment gap that existed between women and men has slowly decreased. We also see that in France, unemployment is much higher for people that are young. Young person unemployment rates are quite high in 2019, over or just about 20% if you're less than 25 years old, and significantly less for those over 25 years old. Now, unemployment moves with the economy, as I mentioned, as the economy moves through its economic cycles. And here I've mapped out for you the economic GDP a cycle. So we're looking at gross domestic product. We can see the trend line here. So we have a long-term trend moving upwards for this economy. And this is the economy of France. And we can see that it moves along this trend line, moving through expansion, down into recession, moving through expansion again, going through recession. And the unemployment numbers also track this. And that's expected. So during the period here when we have GDP falling like this, we would expect that unemployment would actually rise. And that corresponds to the previous graph that we saw on unemployment. Now, I guess an interesting question that one would want to know is, well, why aren't we always in equilibrium in the labor market? Unemployment exists when the demand the demand for workers or labor is less than the quantity of people that want to work. But if we're in an economy, well, wages should adjust and we should find equilibrium. I mean, we're studying economics. We know that supply and demand hopefully equal at some point. So maybe the question we want to know is, well, why aren't they equal? Why are there a lot of people that want to work, but there's no jobs? And that basically means the labor market's not in equilibrium. Well, how does that work? Well, one of the ways this happens is that economists say that we have what's called sticky wages. Wages do not tend to fall a lot. Wages sometimes will go up, but when we try to lower wages, well, wages don't go down. And we need wages to go down to find equilibrium. Well, there's a lot of reasons why this can happen. I'll mention a few, and then I'm going to show you an example of why wages can't go down. First off, the union impact. Workers will fight wage cuts, and we've seen this, and this is one of the impacts of unionized labor. Wage cuts for maybe non-union employees or other specific types of workers are seen as unfair. And so unions will fight wage cuts, and this reduces flexibility in the economy. Secondly, well, we have a problem with adverse selection. If I lower the wages in my company, there's a good chance I may lose some really good people. And I don't want to lose good people, so I don't decrease wages for everybody. I just get rid of people that are not being effective. So instead of lowering wages for everybody, I selectively choose people to remove from the company, making sure to only remove those people that are not performing well. So we don't lower wages in general for everybody. We keep wages high and choose people to let go. And lastly, we have what's called an insider-outsider effect. We tend to, if we decrease our wages, then our people that are already inside our company will maybe leave, and we don't want that. So we've got some potential reasons for a sticky wage. Now, let me explain this a little bit more in detail. Let's consider the case when we have a supply and demand for labor in the labor market. And for some reason, the economy goes into a recession. And this is happening because the demand for goods and services in the economy falls. Businesses see their orders decrease. They no longer need to produce as many goods and services. And so, obviously, the demand for labor will decrease. Now, in an economy, in a very effective and efficient economy, well, we'd find a new equilibrium. And the wage rate and the number of people demanded and supplied would decrease. Wages would fall, the quantity of demand would decrease, and the quantity of labor supply would decrease. Fewer people would want to work at that lower wage rate. But we've seen that wages can be sticky, and wages don't fall very quick. And so what happens? Well, we don't get to this new equilibrium, and wages stay where they are. And if wages stay where they are, well, we have a very simple problem. The problem would be that at this wage, the quantity demanded of labor, meaning the number of people that companies want to hire, is here. And the quantity of people that want to work, the supply of labor, is higher. So we're in a situation where we have an excess of supply. The quantity of labor that want to work to be supplied is greater than the quantity of labor demanded by companies. We are not in an equilibrium. We have an excess quantity supplied at that wage rate, and we get unemployment. This is where unemployment exists and why we don't find equilibrium. Now, in the long run, if we see that unemployment exists through business cycles, economies are expanding and retracting, and we see this movement of labor demand back and forth, and we see sticky wages, well, this is what's called cyclical unemployment. The economy is moving through business cycles, and we associate unemployment with these changes of GDP as cyclical unemployment. But in the long run, we shouldn't be in a business cycle. We should be on a trend line. We should be moving upwards. Our real GDP should be expanding. So why does unemployment persist in the long run? Why do we see unemployment persisting and persisting no matter what over time, even when we're not in a recession? Why does it exist? Well, part of that comes from what's called frictional unemployment. And this is because people are moving between jobs. There's friction. It's not a perfectly fluid labor market. If I decide I want to change jobs, I'll probably look for a job. It'll take me time. I'll leave my job. I may have to move to another city, etc., etc. And so changing jobs can take time. And over this time, as I'm changing jobs, I'm going to be unemployed. And so I'm considered frictionally unemployed. The second reason is because the labor market and the people that want to work may not correspond with the people that we want to hire. So at a given wage, the demand for labor may be high. Companies may want to hire a lot of people. This is the case today, for example, of computer scientists. But there's not enough people. And so the demand is out there. We'd like that to be there, but suddenly we don't have people that can match the skills. So people are looking for jobs, but companies are only hiring, let's say, computer scientists. These people are structurally unemployed, and that will persist for a long time. We've seen this happen in the European economy. We've seen companies trying to hire computer scientists and not succeeding, and it persists. And the only way that will be solved is if we see more and more people getting trained or retrained in computer science. So this is a structural problem with the economy. For some reason, we don't produce enough computer scientists. Why doesn't the labor market, or why doesn't the education market produce more computer scientists? This is a good question. What's happening? Why does this persist? Full employment GDP is the rate of employment, or the associated rate of unemployment, when the economy is cruising along on its trend line and everything's happy. We have no cyclical unemployment. At full employment GDP, the economy is operating at its max. Now, sometimes we'd like to push the economy beyond its max. Unemployment can decrease even further. We can make the machine go faster and faster and make people work longer hours and try to reduce unemployment as much as we can. And typically, typically what happens when this occurs is that we're going way beyond full employment. We're pushing the economy too far, and because we push the economy too far, we tend to generate inflation. To measure full employment GDP, then, we use what's called NERU. And NERU is non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. We call this because of what I just mentioned. If we're at full employment, we're not pushing the economy too fast, and we're not pushing inflation. If, however, we go above this level of GDP, if we try to push the economy, and if inflation rate goes higher, we're going too fast, and unemployment will fall, but inflation will be the result. And we don't really like that either. The natural rate estimates across OECD countries, you can see it right here. We see that Spain and Greece are leading the way with high natural rates of unemployment. This is the rate of unemployment that we would expect when the economy is at full employment, meaning the economy is doing pretty well. And if these people are unemployed, it's because we have a problem with structural unemployment and frictional unemployment, but primarily structural unemployment. We have a significant problem in these countries because even if we're not in recession, we would still see in Spain maybe 20% unemployment. And you can see here for France, let me bring it out here, France, the structural unemployment rate would be almost 10%. This is telling us that, yeah, we can push the economy of France further, we can expand demand, but people will still be unemployed. And that's a problem. How can we impact the natural rates? How can we lower the natural rate of unemployment? Well, we can facilitate job search. We can decrease frictional unemployment, and we make it easier for people to find a job. We can retrain people. Older people are affected, obviously, more by structural unemployment. They've been trained years ago. Maybe they haven't updated their skills. As the economy changes, they find themselves losing their jobs. They haven't updated their skills. Retraining the elderly, retraining people that still want to work is a way around that. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes money, and it can be pretty tough to do. We can impact the natural rate through policies that support unemployed to find a job. But this may stimulate structural unemployment. We have a hard time. We can get people to find jobs quicker, potentially, but we have to be careful. And policies to support the unemployed, like we've seen, maybe what we call a safety net, where we're giving people money if they can't find a job over a long period of time. Well, we may have a situation of adverse selection where people will choose to not look very hard for a job. And this is policies that are supporting unemployment may lead to structural unemployment. Difficulties to lay people off. Obviously, we have labor market rigidities. If I can't fire someone easily, when the economy starts to expand, I won't hire people. So this is a rigidity in the market. Productivity and technologies. We can improve labor productivity. We can add technology, increasing the demand for labor in general. These are technological shifts that happen in economies. Now, obviously, it can go the other way as well, with robots and whatnot for certain types of workers. Training, as I've mentioned. And this is a quote in February 2018 from Reuters. We can see that the unemployment rate dipped below 9% for the first time in 2009, since 2009. And the reason why, however, we're concerned that, in fact, as it says, the country may already be reaching the limits of what economists call its structural unemployment rate, which could be around 9%. And that is a major concern for the French economy. Today, we have a problem with what we see here, skills mismatch. Lastly, when we talk about unemployment, we're talking about potential benefits. And I said that safety net systems that exist help people that can't be employed for some reason. Now, unemployment insurance is paid. When you work, you contribute to unemployment insurance. So it's normal that during periods when you're not working, you benefit from that system. In France today, we have various unemployment benefits that exist for people that cannot find jobs. This is a safety net system in case you can't find a job. ARE is Allocation d'aide au retour à l'emploi. This is typical unemployment insurance. It's available under certain conditions, and it's also available even if you quit your job unilaterally to follow your spouse, for example. This is typically available for an unemployed person over a fixed period of time, and it depends on how long you've contributed to unemployment insurance. We have the ASS, which is also a sum of money for some people that they no longer have access to ARE. And there are conditions to receive that, but as you can see, the amount of money that an individual receives per month is not a significant sum. Also, to access this amount of money, you cannot be having, or you can have other resources, but they're limited. So if you're earning interest income or income from other sources, there's a max. And if you go beyond the max, well, you can't earn ASS. And lastly, RSA. This is kind of like the last stop. I'm not getting income from other sources. I don't have a job. I no longer have the ARE unemployment insurance. I can access the RSA. So there we have it. We've gone through what is unemployment, how is it measured. We've looked at what unemployment rates exist, structural unemployment, frictional unemployment, structural, cyclical, frictional, all of them are important. We've looked at safety nets. We've looked at sticky wages. We've covered the criteria and the main elements of what is unemployment. If you have any questions, please send them to me by mail. And please take a look at the question to be solved below this video. And don't hesitate to read the text on the chapter of unemployment. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned a little bit about what is unemployment, how do we measure it, where does it come from. And again, if you have any questions, please send them along. Wish you all the best and see you next time.